This is Agronomy Moment. I'm Wendell Cohen. Good day. Welcome back to Agronomy Moment. Welcome everybody. Today we're going to talk about fertility, phosphorus, and potassium. I think it's a topic that we need to talk about just a little bit as it relates to what's going on in the soil, a little bit of maybe some of the why, what's, and hows of it. So once again, quick disclaimer, as always, I recommend testing anything new idea in small increments. This is not a Rex for your own farm. Please call and talk to your professional, talk to us about it before you move forward. With that being said, phosphorus and potassium, there's not a lot of new things that have happened in the last, 50, 60 some years.
It's not a lot that's happened with the nutrients per se, but we'll get into kind of what's changed a little bit with genetics and why that looks a little bit different.
Yes, there is a few things that have changed slightly, but nothing major. We're still dealing with the same nutrients.
Macronutrients haven't changed.
Yes, exactly. Phosphorus. Let's talk a little bit about this.
Yep. So this goes a little bit back to the genetics that briefly, that the removal rates haven't changed very much. And as you can see on the bullet points, then and now is hardly changed very much. And then especially with soybeans, we're kind of looking at the same thing. But really what is driving is our yield potentials. Our yield potentials have dramatically increased since obviously, we're looking from 1955 and 60 to 2017, but that's just really interesting and to see how much potential we have
for yield.
And I think that sometimes, we might forget the potential that we have and where we came from.
Well, it's, we're become slightly more efficient with nutrients, but with that being said, we have way more biomass, far more plant structure out there. And ultimately we're seeing, yields are just compounded into the new age of technology as it relates to genetics and breeding and breeding practices in corn especially, but even soybeans. I mean, look at 23 in 1960 to 49 in 2017.
Yeah. I mean, you think about, phosphorus, we tend to think that or know that our corn crop is going to require more than our bean crop is going to require. And obviously you can definitely see between 15 to 60 pounds, it's really changed.
Yes.
But, even in soybeans, it's really interesting to see the change that has come with that also, just because the biomass that we have with the soybeans and today's technology.
Yep. And then let's talk a little bit here about phosphorus as it relates to what it does in the soil. So now we're going to talk about the what. I think it's kind of interesting. Talk a little bit about phosphorus uptake early.
Yeah, so just really with probably any nutrient, we're going to see pretty flat growth or pretty flat uptake early because we're feeding off that, in corn we're feeding off that endosperm, and you usually see that V6 to V10 growth stage in corn. Everything just it needs more of everything at that point because it doesn't have that endosperm, and it has a more established root system. And that, to Wendell's point, is why we see that rapid uptake is now we're talking about a more established root system, a more established plant to be able to better get to those nutrients in the soil.
Yep. And so as we go forward, there's other things that are challenges too, water, clay layers, soil type, pH, all that is challenging how much it's going to be able to take up. So just increasing that interception points of having layers of phosphorus available to that plant so the small root system can take it. One thing I thought was interesting, I just kind of went and found some things of how it relates to the plant itself, what phosphorus does. It's a vital part of DNA, which is the plant's memory. It's part of RNA, which is a memory reader. It reads what's happened. It's part of its energy makeup. It promotes, uniformity, strength of its roots, resistance to disease. If you're at critical levels and we start getting cold where growth is not prolific, that's when you start seeing your plant stunting, your limited roots, and in soybeans you'll see a nitrogen fixation loss.
Yep.
And then the last thing to me is also critical is it takes on more disease.
Yeah. So you put that into, we were talking a little bit earlier about this. I think Wendell puts it in a pretty good, uh, tells a pretty good story about it. If you're feeding your kid, or if you're not feeding your kid, your child is not probably going to be healthy to have a healthier immune system and things like that. Think about that kind of like a plant. If it doesn't have its nutrients there, it doesn't have its system to be able to have a full on healthy plant to be able to counter disease, to counter environmental conditions and other things that are going to be thrown at it at a really could potentially be a pretty quick period and at a very crucial stage, growth stage, as far as it's just small. And you got a small plant, and having those nutrients there is really going to help set that plant up for success.
In a perfect world, I think you could be at critical levels and have a good crop. When we run into challenges, though, is we know there's going to be disease challenges. We know there's going to be that, and that's what starts to really push on that plant. Let's talk about potassium just a little bit. Again, we're just throwing up another slide here of some of the slight changes that have been made in recent years on the efficiency of modern hybrids and varieties.
Yeah, now we can see a little bit more of a difference from the phosphorus conversation, that potassium is really kind of a little bit of a different animal there.
Yes.
More efficient uptake between both crops. Then and now removal rates, we can see between corn and soybeans that both of them have changed quite a bit more than comparing to the phosphorus.
So potassium per bushel, it has fell down. So that's good news. I mean, it means you're more efficient, and as we're raising higher yields, it takes less per bushel. But we still have to be aware that the bushel differences are so different from where they used to be. So while the efficiencies are greater, so is the demand.
So is our potential.
I don't think anybody would consider a 42 bushel per acre corn crop to be a success.
Unless it was last year.
Well, yes, but it wasn't considered a success like in
Right.
I don't think 1955 that was necessarily looked at as a bad thing. It was just that was the average.
Yep.
So that is a lot different to 177. And I'm saying even here in Southwest Missouri, 177 in a decent year is very attainable.
Oh yeah.
And so these are realistic numbers if you're seeing yields on your yield monitor.
Absolutely. And 40 and 50 bushel beans, that's very attainable.
Yes, absolutely. Potassium, what it is, talk a little bit again. I don't know if they need to touch on that much as far as its uptake. It's once again fairly flat.
Yeah, I think in potassium we probably see a little quicker. We see that plant wanting to take up in that scenario. They're going to be corn, but we see that plant wanting to take that up probably a little quicker than phosphorus.
A little steeper demand.
Yep. But again, really gets really steep there once we start talking about that V6 growth stage.
Yeah. This one here has the challenges of water a little bit. Mobility from K relates to water somewhat. So you're going to see it being a little more mobile. Therefore, too much, too little water can affect its uptake.
Yeah.
Potassium, essential in basically every plant process. So.
Yeah, especially think about that on the soybean side of things, because beans are going to be a kind of more driver or need more potassium than our corn crop does. But nonetheless, important to have it out there for both to help with drought tolerance, to help with water loss. It's going to help translocate your sugars, and of course, it's going to help the root growth as well.
Yes. That's where you'll see plants wilt, take on spread disease, lodge, water loss goes up.
Yep.
Potassium, doesn't it control the stoma? Helps with how fast the plant can shut down in a hot weather.
Yep.
And loss of water.
Yep.
So optimize management. So now what do we do about the process?
I think that kind of going really far back, we have to have a foundation, and our foundation is probably going to be our soil sample. So having a soil sample to know where we're at in our soil properties and what kind of fertility pHs we're dealing with, our CECs, is the most one of the most important things. That's how we're going to build our plans. That's how we're going to determine how much we need to build our soil. If we do need to build our soil, do we need to correct our pH?
Yes.
All of that is going to help us with especially our P&K applications, because that's where we're going to see our bigger, drier applications coming and having those out there for vital processes in the plant's life cycle.
Yes. Timing, far as in season, not viable, really. I mean, right? Like it just takes a little time for it to make contact with soil and to explain the process of why you can't just go and do a rescue.
Yeah, so it's going to take time for phosphorus and potassium to break down to where it's plant available for corn and soybeans, or really any plant for that matter. But it's not like we think of as a nitrogen. It's not as mobile in the soil, so we don't have that. We're relying on mineralization to happen for the phosphorus and potassium to come plant available, and to have that continuous soil cycle there for those plants to be able for them to take it up. So it's unfortunately, we see a potassium deficiency or a phosphorus deficiency, and we look out, or we see the outer leaf blades of the soybean, and we're seeing that yellowing. We can't just go out there and throw some nutrient
potash or something.
You can't just go out there and do that, unfortunately. Now, in season, potentially you could take a foliar, leaves and get a foliar tissue test done. And maybe that's a situation where you can see that we're a little bit low on our macros, and maybe a foliar, foliar feed or foliar nutrition could potentially benefit or help the efficiency with that plant uptake some of those nutrients.
And let's talk a little bit on annual versus biannual. I know sometimes it is a practice in which you can fertilize extra for corn, and then there can be sufficient level is the hope for soybeans. There's a little bit of, what's your thoughts on applications like that?
Yeah, obviously whatever is going to be best for your operation, whatever is going to be best for the bottom line and return on investment there is what's going to work for you. But I like to see that risk spread a little bit over the course of both rotations.
Yes. And
the idea there is that you're putting what that crop needs there and going kind of, assessing further on. A lot of the problem is we get into, you can get in low CEC soils, if you got some sandier soils or something like that, your metals are going to tie up your phosphorus, especially. So if you do fertilize extra and you put a lot of extra out there, there's no guarantee, and there's no guarantee anyways, but there's really no guarantee that more risk, like you said, Wendell, with fertilizing that extra, that you might not have that phosphorus availability, because your metals are going to start tying up in those lower CECs and pHs and things like that. So really just a lot of things to think about, and knowing your soil properties, knowing what your soil is capable of and where you stand before you just make a decision,
adopt a practice
decision to go out there and throw all your P&K out and not really knowing where you're standing.
If one sees a lot of variability across your field, or in cases like here in Southwest Missouri where you do have a lot of variability and you're not positive, it seems like annually can reduce some risk there of the tie-up, because you're making another touch point with fresh fertilizer at more times to help introduce a new cycle. You talked about mineralization. You're introducing another fresh layer into that mineralization process.
Yeah, we talk about kind of like a no-till situation where we're not overturning that. We've got, we probably have a little bit higher organic matter.
Yes.
We're going to have a little bit higher probably mineralization rates, because we have more organic matter helping that process. So we're going to have that continuous cycle of phosphorus, potassium breaking down the soil, other nutrients to help those crops.
So hopefully these points here have been helpful to you, our listener. We wanted to touch on this real briefly, just to keep this in front of us as we go forward, that we don't forget our common boring parts of the farming and needs that our crop needs, but they're really vital and important, and a little bit of the why behind.
Absolutely.
Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, reach out anytime. 417-684-5301, or reach out to your local agronomist. host. See ya.
Everyone, thank you for joining us today on Agronomy Moment, a Top Ag Services production. If you want alerts on what we are finding in the field, go to topagservices.com/signups to receive alerts, or subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's our goal to bring you the most recent and advanced information possible. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to reach out to us anytime. We also ask you that you give us a like and follow our channel wherever you listen to your podcasts or watch these videos. This ultimately helps us reach more people like you.
Hello?
Hey, this has been Wendell Cohen, your show host. Thank you to all who made this show possible. This show is over. See ya.